And the trogdor comes in the night. Welcome to the Questionistas. We'll see if I delete that or not. I'm Thomas.
And I'm Spencer.
Quick disclaimer. This is for education and entertainment purposes. If you need help, please see a professional. We are not experts, doctors, nor dragons, nor do we give medical advice. Please take our words with a gallon of salt.
So, Thomas, what's our question today?
The question is, what if I'm wrong?
That sounds vulnerable and uncomfortable to talk about.
Yes, isn't it delightful? I love making people vulnerable and uncomfortable. And actually, that's a really good thing to bring up, is that it makes you feel vulnerable or uncomfortable. And I feel like we do a lot of questions on this podcast that are kind of designed to make you feel vulnerable and uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I want to do that this episode, I want to take us through that vulnerability and discomfort and take us to a safe place, because I believe that we can ask these hard questions and still be okay. One reason that we like to avoid them, and the reason you said uncomfortable, vulnerable, not safe, or unsafe is another word for that, is because we're trying to protect our feelings, our confidence, our security. And I think that we can go through vulnerability and discomfort and come out of it better off. That we get a lot of suffering in the future by trying to avoid suffering or discomfort right now. Mm-hmm. So let's get discomfortable.
That sounds like a t-shirt.
I know. And I said discomfortable instead of uncomfortable. But, my English degree on the wall says, let's see, University of Utah, upon the recommendation of the faculty, has conferred upon, etc. Bachelor's in English with all its rights, honors, and responsibilities. And I think one of those rights is inventing words or inventing new things. And in fact, we're going to get a little bit of grammar in here too. So I think where we want to start is we got to talk about what does it mean to be right and wrong anyway? What do those words even mean?
Yeah, it's an interesting question that leads me to think about, knowledge as a whole, that I have knowledge, I am knowledgeable, I know something, but is it, and we've kind of touched on this before, of knowing things because they're objective truths, or knowing things because they're experiences that you've had.
Right. And I want to get more into this in a little bit. Knowing and believing something true and knowing and believing something false look the same in the brain. Like if I were to crack open your skull, and let's say that you believe that the world is a lumpy ovaloid and that the moon is made of cheese. You believe those with the same conviction and confidence. They look the same in your brain. That pattern, the strength of those neural connections, there's no distinguishable difference. Basically, whether that idea is true in the outside world or not makes no difference on how strong the belief is in your head. So I just want to point that out, because I feel like probably both of us growing up, we were kind of taught that knowledge has a special objectivity to it. And in fact, philosophers, so this is actually quite where I wanted to start, but I'm going to start here anyway. There's a lot of philosophers that get annoyed with psychologists because they use the word knowledge differently.
Sure.
Philosophers tend to use the word knowledge to mean something that you believe that is objectively true, or something that you believe that is true. I'm like, cool. I don't think we can ever know if we have knowledge. So I'll get into that. So what do we mean by the terms right and wrong? When people say that's right, that's wrong, I think that there's a few different related things in here, and sometimes when I use those words, I kind of use them in a more absolutist context. Because, like, if somebody says gravity makes things fall to the earth, and then someone else explains the orbit of the moon, which has two main factors, gravity's pulling it towards the earth, and its momentum is pushing it like perpendicular to the earth. So you add those two together, and it goes in a circle. So one person says gravity makes things fall to the earth, like, and the other person says, oh yeah, and that's part of the reason that the moon is circling the earth. If you don't understand gravity that well, you're like, wait, that doesn't make sense. These don't line up. So from that person's perspective, are one of these people wrong?
I think I'm still trying to wrap my head around what you're saying, which is, I don't know. Say it again. Do it again.
Yeah, no, that's okay. One person says gravity makes things fall to the earth. Another person says, hey, look, there's the moon orbiting the earth. Gravity's a part of it. That's all you get. And you look at the moon and you're like, that's not falling to the earth. It hasn't hit us.
Yeah.
So which one of them is right? Were either of them wrong? And I've had people, when I bring up the right versus wrong question, they'll talk about, like, what was it? Like, accuracy? Like, well, you can be right and accurate and wrong, but accurate, and it just got confusing to me. But my opinion is about saying right and wrong is, how much can you use an idea before it falls apart for you?
Okay. And I've seen that with parables or metaphors, that I think the parables in the New Testament, in the Bible, that Jesus uses,
yes,
are very valuable, but they break down really quickly if you think too hard about them, because they're not meant to be universal. They're meant to be very contextually specific. And almost any metaphor is a good metaphor until it breaks down.
Yeah, you can only take a metaphor so far to describe a concept, and then eventually it just breaks.
Right. And I think that's what I feel like you're getting at, that you can make a statement like gravity is affecting the earth, and that's
like
why
gravity makes things fall and hit the ground.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, well, that's accurate, but that's also not the whole idea. And so
it's like, is that idea wrong? I think one point I want to get to, that right versus wrong are like many absolutist and black and white terms, are not the most useful terms.
Sure.
But we still feel like they're important. This happens a lot with grammar. And people will like to say grammar in English, and yeah, we've got some quirks in English, but it's grammar in all language. But can I go to the bathroom?
I don't know. Can you?
So here's the play out of events. So the child says, "Can I go to the bathroom?" The grade school teacher says, "I don't know. Can you?" And then the college professor says, yeah, they can, because the language has evolved that people are saying, can you, meaning, will you give me the ability to? And also, the majority of people phrase it that way, and the majority of people understand it that way. Therefore, like, it's fine. Language evolves. Get over yourself.
Yeah.
I used to joke with people, I'm the grammar Nazi that corrects the other grammar Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
I should say grammar nut. Let's
Grammar
not use
nut.
Nazi. Grammar nut who corrects the other grammar nuts. Yeah, let's cut out those people. They don't need to be here. And that happens with a lot of concepts I've heard from people who get into the really advanced levels. They're like, yeah, the stuff you learned in grade school, in one perspective, is wrong. At the very least, it's incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
And you get into the advanced stuff in college and you're like, oh, this is a lot more complicated. All right, I think I'm taking too long here. I'm on exploring this stuff, so I'm going to try to keep us moving forward. Did you have a thought before I plow us forward?
No, keep going.
So what I'm trying to establish with this part is, according to one definition of wrong and right, which is the most absolutist way of using them, it's impossible to be right. Everything you know is either just straight up wrong or it's incomplete. The universe and how it works can't fit in your head, especially because your head is smaller than the universe and is part of the universe. So you kind of get this recursive cycle trying to understand it all. And just like we said, gravity makes things fall to the earth. Wrong, inaccurate, incomplete, simplified, whatever, all knowledge will eventually reach a place in which what it suggests will not match reality. That's, I don't know if that's true because I'd have to look at every piece of knowledge in every context. But it seems like every concept or idea has at least some point or place which it's not right. So what I'm trying to establish right there is it's impossible to be right. Doesn't stop us from wanting to be.
Okay, so let me rewind for just a second and then come back to what you just said, because the first part of that is not being able to know everything is scary, and I think ultimately the question of what if I'm wrong has a connotation of fear. What if I'm wrong because that's a bad thing, right? There's some assumption of bad thing, and ultimately the idea of one of the ideas of this is why is being right so important? Why is knowing something so valuable, or so,
why do we want it so bad?
Why do we want it so bad? That's a great question. Why do we want being right so bad?
I think one reason, again, it's that safety. You want to, the unknown, yeah, to some people it's exciting, but to most people the unknown is scary.
Sure.
Who knows what is hiding in the dark that could hurt me?
I think about two places that culturally I came up with, or I grew up with, a needing to know versus believing versus being unsure. And there was both my religious upbringing, but also just, I think, generational upbringing, that I felt like my parents had to have all the answers and they had to provide all the answers. And in some ways we relied very heavily on oral knowledge prior to the internet. And so generationally, no fault to anyone, but I think culturally, someone would come up to you and say, did you know that this is the world? And you're like, I have no way to fact check that. I have to believe you. But my uncle said that this is how the world works. In some ways, I sidetrack, but I think it's relevant that Calvin and Hobbes has a great thread of his dad, him asking a question to his dad, and his dad giving just the most awful, worst answer.
Oh,
is
just these
completely inaccurate,
ridiculous, outlandish, crazy, silly.
Yeah, and he's just like, where does the sun go? He's like, well, the sun has to go take a break because it can't stay on fire the entire time, because it needs to recharge, and don't you need to recharge? And he's just like, and the kid's just like, I'm not buying it. And he's like, hey, what can I say? This is how the world works, and the dad is just, and in some ways that joke is funny pre-internet, but it's not as funny now because the kid would pull out his phone and be like, Dad, you're an idiot. But it's a generational thing of just the confidence that had to be exuded from parents. For what reason, I don't know. I think you could probably do a whole dissertation about it from that generation. But I've tried really hard with my kids to be like, I don't know what to do right now. I don't know have the answer to your question, and that's okay. And giving them that opportunity to know that I don't have the answer to every question that you have. Sometimes it's, well, let's look online or let's ask Google. But also, that comes with its own threats of we're maintaining our knowledge and our confidence in our knowledge, but we're offloading that to someone else. But at the end of the day, just being able to say, I'm not really sure. What do you think? Is a really challenging phrase to do with my kids, partially because I grew up in a culture of I need to know and I need to exude that confidence of knowledge at all time. And one phrase that I had thought about that came to mind was radical doubt. That we have when we've talked about spectrums in the past, and yes, they have their faults, but thinking of a binary spectrum of I know or I don't know is very scary. But that's usually where, when you first start thinking about how do I exude confidence in this thing when I'm trying to also have a nuanced explanation of it, all of a sudden you think, well, the only option is to have full knowledge of it or to have no knowledge of it and complete doubt of it. And that's not really true. But when you've come from a broken Overton window of thinking that you have all, what's that?
What's a broken Overton window?
Well, I'm thinking of an Overton window that's been that has been.
Or I mean, what's an Overton window in general? Let's start there.
Well, we've talked about it in the past, but I'll remind you that the Overton window is on a spectrum. There's a 0, and then there's a middle, and then there's a 1. We should have none of this. We should have some of it with moderation. We should have all of it. And yet the two radical concepts of we should have none of this or we should have all of it starts shifting, because not only should we have all of it, we should have 15 of it for every person, because it's so important to us to have all of it all the time. And then all of a sudden, what that moderate view in the center of just like, well, we should have this, but with moderation, is no longer the center, and we should have all of it becomes the center. And saying we should have none of it is such a obscenely disgusting perspective that it's so radical that it's offensive to have that perspective anymore. And so the far side of the spectrum is just, well, having some of it is the far extreme on one side all of a sudden. And so that Overton window shifts. Whoa. And I think it was named after a dude named Overton. But that window shifts to what is the moderate approach, what is the extreme approach on either side. Well, if you grew up in knowledge is important at all time and confidence in your knowledge is important at all time, anything other than that is radical doubt. And in some way, I think there's a lot to be explored of the concept of radical doubt in a lot of ways, but also realizing, hey, it's okay to doubt a little bit. Doubting 2 + 2 = 4 isn't really worth your time, but doubting other things is okay and valuable. But thinking that you have to doubt every single math equation that you come across, or doubting every time you run into a transaction when you're purchasing something, that's not the doubt that we're talking about. That's not the not having knowledge of all things, I think, that you're trying to speak to. It's being able to know when to doubt and when to have confidence in a level of confidence, or a sufficient level of confidence that you need.
Yeah. So two things I want to say in response to that. One is going to have to do with the spiral that I've gotten into many times before from radical doubt. But growing up in a certain religious context, knowing is treated as like a milestone or a level up. I was X years old when I came to know that this was true.
Mm-hmm.
And now I know that this is true. And there is talk about, oh yeah, you got to do things to keep up your knowledge or you'll lose it. Sometimes they call it faith. But it's like, it's treated as like an achievement. And again, a level up. It is a part of the progression. And once you have that knowledge, well, first off, the promise is that it's supposed to be knowledge that you can be sure of. In other words, I think about a lot of Christian faiths that treat like personal testimony like this. It is a type of knowledge that you have gained that is the experience of gaining it may be subjective, but the knowledge itself, the experience of gaining it might be subjective, but the knowledge itself is supposed to be objective. And that's how they talk about it from that point on. This is objective. I know without a shadow of a doubt, with every fiber in my body, that X is true, that X is right. And that falls apart when you learn that stuff about cognitive science, in which, like, there's no reason for us to believe that your subjective experience has given you an objective right idea.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that we have is your confidence, and we've got tons of different groups with tons of different ideas speaking with that exact same language with the exact level of confidence. So that is, I want to bring it back to the radical doubt. Going from that radical knowledge, that level, where you're treating it like that, and coming to radical doubt is pretty intense. So the two things I want to talk about here is when you come to that realization that you don't know anything. That's part of what I like to call the Socratic realization, and I've probably mentioned it on this podcast before. Trademark, copyright, just kidding. The Socratic realization. I'm so fancy, I've given things names. It's the realization that knowing nothing is the only true knowledge. All other knowledge is pretended.
Mm-hmm.
But it's this kind of moment of, oh, I can't know anything for sure. And that has to do specifically with the Dunning-Kruger effect. Now, this is an idea I don't know if we've talked about on this podcast before, but I'll simplify it like this. Can I put swear words in here? Hey, what swear, does the S word make it explicit? Can I say the S word without, I'll say crap instead. People who don't know crap think they know crap. When they start actually learning crap, they wonder how much crap they know. When they learn even more crap, they think they don't know any crap. But then when they start learning some more crap, they're like, okay, I think I know some of the crap. I probably just destroyed it with all the crap.
Do you know the original study? I think the original study explains it fairly well. Or I can
do it real
quick. Yeah. So basically, they had a whole bunch of college students take a test, 10-point test, 100-point test. I can't remember, but they said answer these questions, and then afterwards, basically, what score did you get? How confident are you in the score that you got? And so they would say, oh yeah, I aced that test. I'm so good. I'm so smart. And then they compare that to the grade that they actually got. Well, what they found was there was a group of people that were highly confident at their score and highly out of touch with reality.
They got it very wrong, but they were very confident.
They were very confident, but very wrong. And so it's kind of a U-shaped dip that there's a small segment of people that they know what they don't know. And they're just like, no, I'm an idiot. I failed that test. And they were right. But then it just spikes really fast to, oh yeah, I totally aced that test. And they are completely blatantly wrong. And then it starts swooping into a U shape where at the bottom of the U are people that are like, yeah, I know that I was mediocre. I got a 50% out of that test. And they're pretty accurate. And then
And they get
on the
like an 89 or something. They
well,
thought they were
well, that's
50, or are you
there's
saying
people.
that somebody was like 50 and they probably got 50?
Yes, and then it slowly creeps up on the other side of the U, which is I probably got an 80, but they got a 90.
Or they got
And
a 99 or something.
right. And so their confidence level is always measured, but they're very knowledgeable about the situation. And so
But they never reach the same confidence
as
unless
the
they're,
idiots.
yeah, unless they
Yes.
are, which sometimes happens, an expert reverts into an idiot. We've seen it happen before. But usually experts are never as confident as the idiots.
Correct.
Usually never. Whatever.
Usually never. Well, and I think we've talked about this before, that sometimes your confidence level in your area of expertise starts extending into other areas of expertise that you do not have knowledge in, but your confidence level extends to those. And so even knowledgeable experts can fall into the Dunning-Kruger if they start thinking that they know about other concepts or other areas of expertise that they're not experts in.
Well, that's why, uh, even if you're very competent and you know a lot, it's just a safe idea to just never get a super high level of confidence. You don't want to have, like, this is what I've experienced before. I get stuck in a loop with things that I have studied the crap out of, like a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I feel this thing right now. I've studied so much cognitive science that I think that it is worth at least a bachelor's degree in it, or maybe even a master's of stuff that I've studied. I've been reading these things. I've been reading college papers. I've been reading, professional scientific journals. I've been reading textbooks for years and studying them and making notes and all these things. But even now, as I say those words, I still feel like, I just really don't know anything. But that's because the more that I learn, it's like you're exploring a landscape and you learn a new thing and you look out from that hill that you just climbed to the top of and you see in the hazy distance 50 other hills.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say you reach 10 of those hills. Well, from those 10 hills, you saw another 50 hills from each. So when they say the more you know, the more you don't know, the more you realize you don't know. But I've, like, when it comes to that radical doubt again, I came from a place of you either know something for sure or you don't even know it. And where I was raised religiously. So it's really easy for me to get stuck into a spiral of, you know what, I just don't know anything. I'm not worth anyone's time. I'm not remotely knowledgeable enough to talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the danger of admitting that you don't know, like, everything you know is wrong or incomplete. That's the scary part. This is the warning part of the episode. And the last part I want to talk about is how to recover from that. But you can't know everything, and everything you know is going to be limited and will fail you at some point. You kind of have to sit with that and my thought is you have to have your confidence shattered in at least a few things to realize because I can say, you don't know everything. And most people be like, yeah, okay, yeah, I don't know everything. No, I mean, like, no, really. You don't know anything. The thing you think you know about politics or relationships or how the world works, there is somebody out there that could tear that idea to shreds and show you that you are as a child trying to understand gravity to an astrophysicist.
So then
So that's it. The end of the episode. We're done. You know nothing.
Well, you at the very beginning you said you don't know anything, but, and there was a but in there. There was a
You're wrong about everything, and that's okay.
And that's okay.
In fact,
So
it's
it
unavoidable.
well, there's still a discomfort that comes from that, and you know, as we're right now in all this, I was just like, how do you manage that discomfort that comes from this concept? Because it still feels discomfortable. It's so going on a t-shirt, by the way. The only thing that came to mind was exposure therapy. That had the way to manage this discomfort is to experience it multiple times. Is to go through the exercise, and I don't know if that's.
I think that's the start. But for a lot of us, like, who are afraid of a world that we don't understand, we feel like there's real consequences to accepting that we don't know everything, or that we don't know completely understand anything.
Yeah.
So there, exposure therapy, you know, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, unless it just cripples you for life.
Mhm.
So, you know, the one phrase, like, and that's kind of exposure therapy, is saying, "Oh yeah, you just got to be subject to it over and over again, and you'll get stronger." It's like, well, I've seen people subjected to certain things, physical, mental, emotional trials, illnesses, things like that, who are just beaten down and exhausted. Like,
Right.
you need something more. You need to know that it can be okay to live in a world that you don't understand. You can't hold it all in your head. And kind of the implication of that is, I want to try to verbalize this. It's hard. A lot of us feel that I must understand the world to feel safe in it. That is another belief that we have.
Mm.
It's usually subconscious, but I believe that I have to understand the world in order to feel safe in it. That is a requirement.
Do you think that's inherent? I mean, like there's supposedly a fear that every baby has, and I can't remember what the two fears are, but one of the fears is the fear of falling. Like that's supposedly inherent in every child when they're born. Do you think it's as inherent as the fear of falling that we must maintain this sense of confidence? Or
I don't know. I feel like this fear of the unknown happens with beings capable of higher level thought, aka humans, as compared to other animals. Like, does my dog have existential dread? I don't think so, and if she does, poor thing.
I know
I
it
don't
has
know.
dread on being not being loved enough, and it needs cuddles. That's about as far as I've seen my dog.
They need the cuddles.
They need the cuddles.
And you know what? Sometimes we just need a cuddle to feel better about not knowing everything about the world that we live in. I think one important thing about it is, before we dive a bit more into what I like to call, actually, this is kind of the intro to radical acceptance.
Yeah.
If all that you can do is the best that you can, or if all that you can know is all that you can know, like, no matter what, it's going to be incomplete, then you have no other options. So if you accept as true, I have to understand the world to feel safe, and then you learn, I can't understand the world, then if you maintain both of those beliefs, you'll just never feel safe. One of them has to go.
Okay.
I have to know everything to feel safe. I can't know everything. One of them has to go in order for you to feel happy, to feel at peace. And it's the one that says, I have to know everything to feel safe. It just doesn't. It's one of those ideas that just keeps butting against reality, and it's just like, it's one of those things where it's like, you can't choose for the universe to work a different way. So what can change at that point is your attitude about it. And it takes a lot of work, but your attitude about whether, okay, I can't know everything. That's all right. But guess what? It doesn't have to be black and white. You can't just be like, oh, I don't know anything. Okay, there's nothing I can do. I'm just going to be miserable. It's like, well, actually, if you start to understand things better and you get closer to being right, then you can be happier with the same amount. Like knowing that eating healthier food will make you less miserable in the bathroom or just in general. Like, it doesn't have to be, I know everything, I feel perfectly safe. I know nothing, I feel perfectly unsafe. You can say, oh, I'm starting to understand better. I can start to feel safer. Or I can start to feel happier. You've just, it's that going from absolutism to probabilities or proportions and ratios. Like you can, it takes more mental work.
There's a question that I had around this that I was thinking of: confidence versus knowledge. How are they different? And confidence in your knowledge versus knowledge in your knowledge, or belief in your knowledge. I was reminded of a story of my dad. When he was 18 years old, he was like the national target champion of the US. And he was, yeah, he was a big deal when he was about 18 years old. And his shooting skills were really high.
Was he anything like that one guy from the Olympics? You know who I'm talking about? The
Yeah.
guy who was just
They
like
just
so
showed
chill.
up without any technology.
And there's all these other people with like all this gear, and he's just like, pop, look at that, I got second place just for showing up.
No, I mean, he worked very hard, and his dad, one of the tricks that his dad did is with clay shooting. I mean, he did target shooting with rifles, but he did a lot of different shooting. And so he did clay shooting with a shotgun, and you throw a disc up in the air, and he had my dad blindfolded, and he said pull, and he's like, okay, aim, and he aimed and he shot, and he's like, good job, you got it. Totally missed. And then he'd do it again. He's like, pull, and he'd shoot, and so he's shooting multiple times, countless times, and every single time he's missing. But the point wasn't whether you were missing or not. The point was my grandpa, my dad's dad, was giving him this sense of confidence in what he was doing, was able to visualize success. So
your grandpa's a frickin' genius.
It's really cool, but
I'm thinking about all these cognitive science
that's what I wanted to ask you about, because there's a part of it was like he just created blind confidence. Or did he create a sense of allowing the person to visualize success to a point where when he does actually shoot with his eyes with full vision, that he's able to visualize success every single time and not worry about the doubts and the second guessing that occurs, but allowing him to just go and be successful?
Well, that's kind of the amazing thing about like knowledge or confidence or whatever. You can be, let's just say in general, if we say that being right means you're 100% correct, then you're always going to be wrong about what level of confidence you have in your knowledge. And that goes both ways.
Okay.
Meaning, and we talked about it with Dunning-Kruger even, because it's considered a virtue to be a realist. Like, you know what? I don't think I could actually do that. My wife sometimes does this. Like, I'm better than those overconfident people because I know what I can and can't do.
Okay.
There's some benefit to that. If you're going to be wrong about your abilities, there can be a benefit in thinking that you're better than you think you are. Okay, it's getting a little meta in here. Like, if you think that you're better at basketball than you actually are, then that confidence can help your brain be better at basketball.
Okay.
So it's this weird loop, okay? And again, because we're in a way we're talking about being right, but confidence, being right about how reality is, right? But your confidence is a factor in what you can do. In learning, they call that, oh shoot, I forgot what it was called. But essentially, how well people learn things is strongly affected by, well, how important they think it is, but how confident they are in that they can learn it. Having a growth mindset, and maybe that's almost the direction that I want to take this part. Is there's a lot of people who are like, they're like, I have a fixed mindset. They don't know that. I can do X, Y, and Z, and I'm being a realist. And maybe for that present moment, maybe they're kind of right. But also, you can grow and change, and you can do better if you act like you're more confident than you are. Gosh, it's just, I know, it gets in this crazy, like, weird recursive loop. It's like, wait, so you're telling me that I can do better because I think that I can do better, even if before that I couldn't do that level of better.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm getting confusing. Tell me if I'm getting confusing. It's a little recursive.
Well, it feels like it's throwing Dunning-Kruger on its head by saying, no, the problem with Dunning-Kruger is not don't be confident in what you're doing, because you need to maintain that confidence. It's just you need to also have the learning and the knowledge and the experience to back it up. Because it's my dad didn't shoot blindfolded for a day and then go to a competition hoping that the blindfolded experience taught him everything he needed to do. The blindfolded experience taught him the confidence so that the training that occurred for weeks on end prior to the competition
was more effective.
And so having a sense of confidence while you're training, while you're learning, while you're willing to accept that you don't know everything. And I think that for weeks you have been telling me we don't know everything, we don't know anything. The only knowledge that we can
I know,
have.
I'm like a broken record on that sometimes.
Yeah, and I'm just like, that feels so nihilistic, that feels so defeatist, and how and why. And yet for some reason today you finally added the amendment that's important, and that's okay. And that needs to be the factor that allows us to understand, build your confidence. That's not meant to destroy your confidence, and it's not meant to destroy your learning. It's the moment in which it allows you to experience that you can still learn, and that you can still be excited and enjoy the experience of learning.
I'm going to wrap a couple of concepts together.
Okay.
One I mentioned earlier was coming to know something was treated like an achievement or a level. And we've been talking a bit about being honest with yourself. Maybe there is something worse. Let me think how to say this. Maybe the only thing worse than feeling that you're always right or always correct is being frozen.
I'll take it.
So I don't even want people to think that they're, and that's why I'm kind of trying to stab my "you're wrong about everything" phrase in the back, is like gotta be more like liquid, gotta be more like flexible and moving. Like am I right, am I wrong, am I realistic, am I pessimistic, am I nihilistic, am I optimistic? It's just like, it's just like whatever, man. Just like you gotta flow with it, because you don't understand the world, so keep playing in it, keep exploring it, keep growing, keep changing. Like, and if something an idea wants to get stuck to you, just say, you know what, I'm going to hold you. I'm going to hold this idea, but I'm not going to like absorb it into my essence. It's just an idea. And it's okay. I can throw it out and I can pick it up again later. It's fine. I can, like, when I say it's the only thing worse than thinking you're right is to be frozen, is that cocky turd face who thinks that he's, God's gift to sales is going out there making a lot of money in sales. So maybe he's overconfident or something, and maybe he's wrong about a whole bunch of other things, but you know what? He's doing something. And there is an aspect of the hopeful aspect of this about you being wrong is that you're also wrong about your limits.
That is probably the best way to wrap up this episode.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm going to add one more thing, and that is I'm going to give you guys a lingering question. And that is, what if I'm right?
Sounds like we've got the next episode in the bag already.
Mayhaps. Oh, but then I have to confront my my underconfidence. All right, guess we better do it.
All right.
All right, friends. Peace out.
Thank you.